This episode of the Unbuild It podcast is brought to you by Huber Engineered Woods. When we talk about Huber Engineered Woods, you know, we say they make Advantech, we say they make Zip System, you know, they have liquid flash and subfloor glue and tape. And I think that most of our listeners are fairly familiar with their product lines. They make really high quality stuff that makes our job easier. But I also wanted to let you know that they have a couple of new products on the market that they just announced at IBSX for 2021. They have Advantech X Factor, and they have a new vapor permeable tape. And I think that those things are very important because they go to show what Huber Engineered Woods is really about. They're innovating and they're problem solving before even builders like myself have asked for those things. That process of innovation has kept them at the top of the game, at the top of the pile, and that process of innovation has caused builders like myself who are focused on durability and energy efficiency and really doing things the right way the first time to believe in them as a company and to use their products. We've been using their original Advantech formula since the late 90s as a company, and we've been using Zip System since 2013. So I think that proves to you my belief in the company. I hope that you'll look into Huber Engineered Woods, and thanks for sponsoring the podcast. Let's talk construction management software and what makes a software good. First, I'd say the ability to tackle the tasks that I needed to do, but more importantly, the ability for my team to comprehend the software, my clients to comprehend the software, and everybody involved to actually want to use that software or that interface. BuildBook could be that software for you. BuildBook is simple to learn and use. It allows for constant communication between you, your team members, and your clients. It doesn't waste time with unneeded features, and you won't have to send your team across country to learn how to operate it efficiently. At the end of the day, BuildBook should reduce your stress and your team's stress as well. BuildBook is an all-in-one construction software for today's builders. Whether you're a one-person operation or a large building crew, BuildBook has plans to fit your budget. They don't have any of those nagging sales calls or tricky upsells or hidden fees. You can sign up for a 10-day free trial with BuildBook so that they can teach you and show you what the value is of their product. You should head over to buildbook.co to get started. Don't forget to mention that you heard it from us, the Unbuild It podcast. That's buildbook.co. Thank you, BuildBook, for your sponsorship. Welcome to the Unbuild It podcast. I'm Jake Bruton. Today I'm joined with my co-host, Steve Basic.
Hello, hello, hello.
And one of my favorite people in our industry that I just randomly met.
I already said hello.
All right, sorry. How do you know I wasn't talking to Peter? Pete's not here? That was your chance to say Pete's not here,
man.
Who I'm speaking about is Clayton DeKorne. Clayton is the editor of JLC. And, is that still your job title, Clayton?
That's still my job title. Yes.
Okay. I'm just checking. Welcome.
Well, thanks
you. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. And yes, my job title is it's chief editor of the JLC group.
Okay. There we go. I knew it wasn't exactly editor of JLC anymore.
Right. It's because I have sort of oversight over Professional Deck Builder and Tools of the Trade and Remodeling Magazine and Pro Sales. And what I mean sort of is that I have such a great team. Andy Wormer really handles all of the Pro Deck Builders things. Together now we share Tools of the Trade because we lost the esteemed editors in the past that made that title so great, Chris Ermides and
Mark,
yes. Clement, thank you. Sorry. Having a middle-aged moment here. And then on the pro sales and remodeling side, the help of Vince Salandro. So some great people working with me. And I just have to fill in their, HR reports and things like that. So I get to take all the credit.
I think you guys can already get a sense of part of the reason that I like Clayton. He's very modest and very kind at the same time, which have a tendency to go together. But thank you again for being on the podcast. Let's start for the listeners that don't know you or don't know JLC, which I can't imagine is very many. Can you give us the 10 minutes or less? Who is Clayton? How did he wind up at JLC? And what is your history like?
Hey, Jake, for all the listeners that might not be closely related to the industry, JLC is the Journal of Light Construction.
Correct.
National publication dealing with light construction and remodeling.
Yeah, and so to pick up right on that, Steve, you gave me a perfect segue because I've always thought that the Journal of Light Construction is a really funky name. It started out as the tagline to another magazine called New England Builder that started in, 1983, I believe. And I used to read that as a carpenter living up in Burlington, Vermont. I went out on my own as a trim carpenter and remodeling contractor, and in 1988 we started to have a little recession. And I was used to having work lined up a year in advance, and suddenly didn't know what my next job was in February, about the time my second daughter was about to be born. And so I answered an ad in the back of New England Builder for an assistant editor, and a part-time job. And I thought, okay, well, here's something I could do to fill in my time as I'm twiddling my thumbs waiting for the next job to come along. And I did that for about 6 months, and then they offered me a full-time job, and I never looked back, partly because so the reason I was hired was to make the shift from a New England Builder, obviously a regional publication, to a national title. And the publisher at the time, Mike Reitz, who was a contractor himself in the Northeast Kingdom of Vermont and started this on his kitchen table as just a way of contractors talking to contractors, a need for sort of peer forum community, or asking questions of our peers. And of course, we're all used to that now with Facebook groups and Instagram and that sort of thing. But back in 1983, there was no such thing. So he started New England Builder, and
back then, Clayton, Mike Girton was like in his mid-50s, right?
I didn't know Mike Girton at the time. I didn't meet Mike Girton until the 90s, and met him because one of the things that made it so exciting to be at JLC was we started JLC Live, first as a conference called the Construction Business and Technology Conference. That one rolls off your tongue really easily.
Just great naming history here.
Great naming history, right? But then that did somebody in the organization, Craig Savage, came up, I think, with the title of JLC Live. And that's partly because he and I pioneered this idea of creating live demonstration events on the show floor, which most building shows at the time just had the expo, and you walk from booth to booth with not a lot of happening in terms of hands-on education. So that was I loved JLC Live, and part of what I loved about it was all the young contractors who were coming to the show, who we didn't meet otherwise, right? JLC, the subscriber list was mostly a bunch of old hippie carpenters. I'm saying that jokingly and lovingly.
And as an old hippie carpenter, too.
Exactly. So But yeah, and also the trade schools would come with their students who would follow the instructor around like a little school of fish, and talking to those kids and showing them, kind of demonstrating face to face, like they're used to being sort of marginalized in the trade programs in their high school trade programs, and suddenly here's a place, JLC Live, that where they're front and center. So I ended up leaving JLC to get a degree in education because I thought I wanted to transform vocational education. And while I was in school, the internet happened. We were still on dial-up and that sort of thing, but the internet started to get really robust, and it was obviously where education was going to happen in the future. So I sort of shifted my focus of my master's degree on that. And then afterwards worked for the New York Times Learning Network for a little while before Craig Savage came back into my life and offered me a job working for Building Media. And I worked for his team for a lot of years, mostly doing online video-based training for a lot of code inspectors. California Energy Commission was a big client, and so we tried to make Title 24 understandable to the code officials, because nobody would say anything about what the true compliance rate was in California. But the suggestion was that it was pretty low, and that was because Title 24 at that time, the residential side had a 950-page compliance manual, and on the commercial side, it was closer to 1,500 pages. And now, to be fair, CEC has done an amazing job of boiling that down and making it comprehensible to both the contractor and the building official. But at the time, it was pretty clear that if the code officer doesn't understand the code, they're not going to enforce it. And if they're not going to enforce it, the contractor's not going to do it. So anyway, that's what I did for a lot of years before the congressional sequester of 2012 shut down all the state contracts. And at that time, it was CEC and the Texas Department of Insurance. And we finally had landed a contract with NYSERDA, the New England State Energy and Research Development Authority. But that got canceled or put on pause because all the governors were not sure about their funding from the federal government. So they pressed pause, and I was left twiddling my thumbs until I called Sal Alfano, who hopefully is known to a lot of people here, a great friend and a true mentor. And he said, yeah, come on back, and put me in place as the executive editor for about 6 months. And then he dove out of there to take on another job that he felt he could do for a few years and make his retirement a lot easier, because he was making a lot more money working for a family-owned publishing entity as opposed to an equity-based entity. So that's what he did, and I ended up at that time editor of JLC. So was that less than 10 minutes?
We get caught up in life happens while you're not planning for it, sort of thing. And I was listening to you tell the story, and you're like, "Oh yeah, I called Sal," and it's like that's all it was you called Sal. But then what is this? 10 years later, we're sitting here talking about your time at JLC. Like it's bizarre to me, and I just had that weird thought while we were talking. Sorry.
No, it's a very valid thought. I think about it all the time, especially guiding younger people into the trades. I advocate for the trades enormously, but in a lot of ways, it was a very happenstance decision for me. It was because it's what I could do, and it was growing up in a family. My father did a lot of contracting, a lot of odd jobs, and he was the son of a big builder, a big California builder, a community builder, and more of a developer, not a hands-on guy at all. But my dad was, and he was the black sheep of the family. and hauled his family out to the wilds of New Mexico and started a homestead. And that's what I grew up on, without electricity or running water. And
Where in New Mexico?
a little town called El Rito, north of Santa Fe in Rio Arriba County.
There's nothing up there.
It's beautiful country. It's in the Rocky Mountains, and it's close to 9,000 feet above sea level.
So here's a funny thing. For 12 years, I used to take my family on vacation in Vaughn, New Mexico.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Population of, I don't know, maybe 20.
Yeah, Vaughn is a very interesting place. Cowboy country.
Cowboy country. Yeah, that's why we went down there to work on a ranch.
I think that's what their Board of Tourism sign says. Former vacation place of Stephen Basic Architects.
Well, and Billy the Kid was jailed not far from there. It's Billy the Kid country, too.
Yeah.
So is it possible to grow up where you grew up, Clayton, with your parents and not wind up some version of a hippie?
We were talking about decisions, my father, it's impossible. Although I steered clear of all the hallucinogenics, mostly because of observing people having a really bad time with that. So not necessarily my parents, but, just in the community at large, the hippie community at large, it's like, nope, I'm not going to do that.
So are we saying hippie light? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I'm one of those weird, like, conservative hippies, I guess you'd call it. I'm very...
Okay. It's funny that we put ourselves into boxes, but the boxes can be fun sometimes too.
It's enormous fun. You got to poke fun at yourself, though. You can't take yourself too seriously. So,
I think it's pretty hard to grow up where I grew up and have a father that's a farmer and not wind up being a farmer. It's the same sort of idea, it's just a different place.
Right.
So then this time around, you've been with JLC for 9 years, 11 years, somewhere in there?
Well, since 2013, July 2013. Okay. So we're rounding on about, 8 years now?
Yeah. And you are also in charge of the newsletter that I get every week too, right?
Well, I have to give more credit to Andy for doing that. He handles the day-to-day of the newsletter.
Okay.
But I get to have last word on
Gotcha.
the order and selection, and I very rarely change anything that he does. And
Andy's a fantastic guy.
Yeah.
I've worked with Andy too. Andy, we're not. Don't think we're dissing Andy.
It's so much of a team effort, because we meet once a week on a call and talk about the lineup for the print magazine and for the newsletter that week and for any other projects we might have going. It's a great team effort. I can't emphasize enough what a great group of fellow ex-contractors turned editors.
So that's the reason that I brought up the newsletter again. Is it is one of my favorite online sources for information, and I say that because a lot of the online sources that I use, I seek out specific types of information in those resources. And the fact that I get a curated email that has some thought behind it leads me down paths that I wouldn't, I didn't necessarily know that I needed to be paying closer attention to. I exist where if I see something from Mike Gurton, I stop and read it. I stop and listen to it. But beyond Mike, don't tell Steve. I don't even read everything that Steve writes. Just seeing if he's paying attention. He's not paying attention. But I don't know. It's the same as the, NPR news story that you didn't know that was going to be interesting. You stumble upon something, but I'm not stumbling upon it. I'm signed up for the newsletter, and I'm not stumbling upon it. But every time I open it every Sunday, it is stumbling upon it. I do discover something that I didn't know to be looking for, I guess. So that's a thank you, in other words, and I'll tell Andy next time I see him too.
Yeah. Well,
But I think part of our conversation today was going to be about the internet and how we find information on the internet and where you see both of our industries going. I like your insight to the future most of the time, so I thought we would pick your brain on that. So, where are we headed? Where are you headed? Where are we headed?
That's a good question. I do feel like we are very much at an inflection point in the information age, right? It's there's no question that everything is online, and we certainly see that at JLC. We track really closely, like even how readers are reading us, and the majority is now on mobile, and that was not true 5 years ago. The majority. I guess it's pretty close now between mobile and desktop.
Wow.
But the mobile is just constantly up, and that's where we live, is on our phones now, and that's how we consume our information.
So for the magazine, I still like a paper copy in my hand,
mm-hmm.
and I don't know why. I just now realized that, like, I read all my news through the iPhone app for the news, and I have major news sources plugged into there. But for some reason, when it comes to industry publication, maybe it's the fact that I like a thing. I like the object, and I like the shelf full of magazines that are in order.
I like the thing. Now, there's something to quote.
Well,
I like
you know what
thing.
I mean? I like the object. It's the same reason that I buy the book instead of checking it out from the library, because I want to have the book after I read it, sort of thing.
Well, you put it on your shelf. It makes you feel smart.
Well, they're in a stack on the floor, technically, but yes.
If you have to send it back to the library, it leaves an empty bookshelf. People think you're stupid. So.
I don't
think I'm fooling anybody.
I certainly get screen fatigue, partly because I look at a screen all day long for my job, and whether it's the phone or a laptop, it's not very restful to always be consuming information digitally. So
I get client fatigue.
Yeah,
I get architect fatigue too. Since we're bringing it up.
Yeah, that's funny. You ain't seen nothing yet there, buddy.
I also like the
architect. You're not. I shouldn't say you're not a real architect. You defy.
No, I think you could say that.
No, but Steve is like.
I'll take that as a compliment.
Beyond architect in a way. You are. You defy the stereotypes, and unfortunately, the stereotype is very, very common.
Hey, I got a question for you.
Freshly showered or concerned with hygiene, those kinds of stereotypes about architects, Clayton?
Yeah, the funny glasses. Okay. No,
my bow tie.
How many berets do you own,
The
Steve?
overemphasis on design over functionality, to me, that's a stereotype that still exists in the design community, and
well, it's an art form, right? You have to be an artist. You couldn't possibly be grounded in reality and still be an artist.
Well, that's not true. Leonardo da Vinci was an artist.
I know, but that's not the way people view. His understanding
of mechanics was unheard of in the day.
Yeah.
Right. So, but Clayton, let's just get back to a foundation here and talk about print for a second. Do you find it as a scary time for print or exciting time? Meaning, like, is there changes that are going to come about that makes it really exciting to migrate from there, or is it scary times that?
Well, I will admit that JLC is just a different animal that defies all the conventional thinking in my mind. I certainly would not invest in print right now. But the scary time, I think, was 10 years ago. And JLC has persisted in print without, quite frankly, a whole lot of investment. In other words, the company that owns JLC has rightly put their focus on growing the digital side and made that transition right around the time that I was coming on board as an editor is when we were, and that you have to understand is for the publishing industry is really, really late. And the only reason it was so late is that print was really viable in the construction industry. Mm-hmm. And the parent company was very vertically aligned in every segment of the construction industry, from architect, builder, concrete construction, masonry, design, just pool and spa.
Does that mean that your readership they just favor print over?
Well, I just think it was a
longer time.
I think that.
I still do. I like getting magazines and looking at the pretty pictures and the captions and all of that.
I do think that the building industry as a whole, they're slower to adopt change, maybe, and I don't mean that in a bad way. I actually think that sort of conservative streak of being cautious and is part of what makes building so interesting to me. There are still...
Yeah, we're all worried we're going to get sued.
Yeah, it's all about risk. It really is. Well, it's one of the riskiest industries out there. And so to be cautious and to not jump into the next fad. And you have to understand a lot of publishing is all about, it's epitomized by like People Magazine and TMZ and, all of that shifted 20 years ago to online. Whereas
I think the building industry, I think the building industry, for all of us, clients, projects, interfacing with, manufacturers, material suppliers, all of that stuff, like your day can just be so mixed up in stuff that the building industry needs something to look back on that's pretty steady state, right? And I think that's why they resist change, is that every day you're dealing with fires, forest fires, right? You're
Absolutely.
putting out fires, and you want to go home and have something that is still there.
Reliable.
Right? You don't want your JLC and your media package to all of a sudden be changing now. And now I have to figure out, where do I get that, subscribe to that. It's like, I just want the magazine in the mail. I want it on my coffee table, so when I sit down in my chair, kick my feet up, I can read it. And there's a security in that, I think.
It's funny that you say it like that too, the lack of change, because the first thing that popped into my head was like, yeah, but like when it comes to adopting technology and things like that, my dad, when I was in middle school, was the first person I knew that had a cell phone, and he was a builder. Mm-hmm. But now that I realize it, he was like the last person I knew to get a smartphone, because having a cell phone was just having better access to a phone. Having a smartphone meant there were other things and other tasks that tool could do for him, and he wasn't interested in changing things around.
Yeah, his life was complicated enough. He didn't need a phone to add to complication. He needed the phone as a solution to complication. Yeah. And it's all perception, because I'm totally guilty of it. Like when my kids are always, I'm trying to figure something out, and then they just grab my phone and figure it out for me in like 5 seconds. But
isn't that wonderful?
It is. It is. But it's not that I can't do it or that. I don't want the change. and I think the older you get, you want the world.
You sound like Peter, by the way.
Well, I'm not that old. But I think the older you get, the more you want the world to slow down for obvious reasons. But,
yeah, I guess that there's something I can only speak for JLC, that the print is a good foundation. But what's really exciting in the world of information is happening online. And JLC is a funny mix in that it also defies all the thinking about what digital media should be, right? Short, easily digestible bits of information. So what are we doing with this long text-based, sort of thing of articles?
This newsletter weekly that would take me an hour to get through.
Yeah,
well,
and
other
lots
thing
of ugly pictures, not a lot of
Carpenters
pizzazz,
on site took.
stuff.
the other thing that's JLC is invaluable with is the archival information.
Well, that's
catalog.
just it. It's
being able to go back and say, I know there's this article on, handrails or something, and it's like I have to go find it. I mean, me personally, having authored a number of articles, it's really good when people, they text me or email me and they ask a question about something, and I can say, hey, I could just go on JLC Live, get not JLC, but JLC Online, and grab it, and then do a copy and paste the URL and send it to them and say, here, just go read the article. Because the information is there.
Exactly. So. I do think that is the primary value of JLC in this day and age. And that is a function of a digital medium, right? The fact that it's searchable and you can go find, and there's 35 plus years of builders talking to builders. So it's the by builder, for builder format that I think makes JLC valuable. Now we have that in spades on Instagram right now, but Instagram or Facebook groups where there's a fantastic forum, right? JLC had a wonderful forum for years and years that kind of led the industry in this kind of dynamic peer communications. It's just a really old, deprecated format, so we retired it because it was eclipsed by things like Instagram,
Facebook, and IG.
The problem, and here's the idea that I promised you, Jake, of the coder who figures out how to make Instagram searchable is the one who's going to be as rich as Jeff Bezos and put every other form of media out of business. Because if you could go back and find all those conversations, those wonderful moments, we vaguely remember Steve said this and that Jake said this and all the other.
But
amazing...
does Instagram save those? I mean,
they're there. They're there on your channel. I mean, you go. How many
that's true.
posts?
You can go back.
How many posts have you done, Steve? It's at the top of your list.
Too many.
But how am I going to find which one by just skimming through a grid of?
Yeah, I mean, I have a problem. I'll be sitting at a client and be like, "Oh, I have that picture. I remember posting it a few months ago," and it takes me 5 minutes to find my own damn photo.
But there's a wealth of information there. We just can't get to it, and that's probably the one thing that is keeping JLC most in the game is that we have a searchable format. And that was the wonderful thing about the JLC forums until they sort of got eclipsed by the trolls. And that was,
those forums are still up, though, right, Clayton?
They are still up.
Is commenting turned off?
Yeah, they're just not active. So they're sort of in read-only mode. But you can still, there's still a wealth of it. And that's why we did it, is because the value in the forums. And there's still some of the if you're searching JLC online, whatever the topic, lumber prices or Advantech or whatever you want. It's like chances are a forum discussion is going to come up highest in the search.
Yeah.
But you know what? I mean, some of the more contemporary forums that exist now, I get really frustrated with. I'll go on there and there's 285 people and, all talking about something, building technology related or whatever. But it seems to become kind of a soapbox, like, hey, this is my 15 seconds. And so people get up there and start. I mean, I sat in one a couple weeks ago where, like, I wanted to crawl through the screen and just choke about 5 people because of what they were saying and it's like, I don't know. I couldn't have disagreed more with a few of them on where they were going with some technologies and stuff. But it's like, it's their 15 minutes. And so we all had to sit through it. But,
well, and they pile on whoever they think is right.
Well,
that everybody agrees and stops adding things to the conversation.
You have 250 people. There's chances are there's 25 or 30 people there that don't know any better, and they're taking what this person is saying for, like, the truth, and walking away going, "Oh, well, I heard Johnny say this, and or Tommy or whoever," and it's like, no, you don't want to, like, cancel this from your mind. This whole forum. So it's, with information, it's a good thing at how accessible it is. But man, you really have to develop a sense of how to weed your mental garden. How's that? I know Jake likes it when I come up with these things.
I like the weed your mental garden. I mean that, and we all need to be edited, right? We all need to sort of have the wisdom to put something down and then come back and look at it and say, well, is that right? And how does that square with this other piece of information that?
But that's what's so valuable about your archives, is that you guys already weeded the garden by picking the right people to author that article. Yep. So I might not agree with Gurton in his 40s, in the late 70s when he wrote that article, But it isn't that it's wrong. It's just, I just disagree and probably wouldn't do it that way. But there is certainly some enlightenment to every one of those articles, in that there is truth to it, and they believe that's the right way to do it. And the same with articles that I've written or Jake has written, right? We believe our stuff to be right. But I'm sure there's people out there saying, oh, I would never do that way. That's fine. You don't have to. This is my way of doing it.
And the barrier of entry for sorting the wheat from the chaff, to use a Peter quote. Hey, you brought up gardening.
It's weeding the mental garden.
The longer you are in the industry, the more informed you are, the easier it is. But it's not the people that have been in the industry for 30 years that are the ones looking for the information through Instagram or Facebook. Mm-hmm. So it becomes that much more challenging, I think, for the industry. That, you can be, Tim with Awesome Framers. I'm pretty sure he's not going to put up anything that leads people down the wrong path. And that shows in the number of followers that he has. There are also some people that I will not bring up names.
But in the same vein, he probably frames followers. In the same vein, he probably does some framing tips and techniques that there's probably other well-known framers.
There's stuff that could be challenged.
That say, I just don't do it that way. I always do my layout this way or that way.
Yeah,
sure.
But there's also people online that have 50 to 80,000 followers that either aren't saying anything of use to most people or are preaching down the wrong path, and that's a really difficult thing to handle, And I think all I'm saying is, like, man, Instagram is awesome, and I love Instagram, and I'm glad that I'm part of it. Trust but verify what you read on Instagram. Try to get the information a second place before you just adopt.
Absolutely, that's a good. I know I learned to be, part of Instagram is that it's a very positive community, which I really like. Facebook became very snarky, and I feel primarily because you can post other people's stuff really easily,
Yep.
and you can.
It's not your thought, so I can criticize what you put up.
Right.
On Instagram, I'm criticizing you.
Right, because it's easier to put your own stuff up, and that's a wonderful thing because you have a lot of people who are very excited about what they're doing, snapping pictures of their work and posting it every day. I love that enthusiasm. I think that's what's energizing the trades, because it's a lot of pride in craftsmanship and pride in the work, pride in the lifestyle. And all of that we need more of that. We need that in spades in this industry, especially to attract new young people into it, to show them how exciting it can be. But at the same time, I've learned I have to be really careful what I like, what I put my little heart on, because there's a lot of bad work that gets photographed and put up with pride.
Well, and
that just comes from this. I think that comes from a very genuine place, which is that most builders want to do the right thing. They just don't always know how.
Yep. And I think that I hadn't really thought about it before, the pride aspect of what we put up. When I put stuff up, I am excited to share it. I want other people to see it, and I'm happy about it. Man, can you believe that we're friends, Clayton? Can you believe that I'm friends with him?
I can.
But like that
like
sense
brothers.
that sense of pride that I have, I see that in other people's stuff, and I get motivated by it.
Yeah.
And that I don't believe that ever came across from any builder that I talked to until 10 years ago. I never talked to anybody that was like gung-ho, check this out. Oh, you got to see what we did here. Like, and it just, and I don't know if the internet made us more willing to share, or if it's a generational thing. And I just talk to a lot more builders that are way less grumpy old man reserved than my father's generation of builder. Maybe that's all it is that it's a generational thing. Because I certainly feel like the people that are in the generation below me are way more enthusiastic about it if they are invested in it than I am. So I don't know.
I would think that that's part of it. I think it's also just that we never before in the building industry had a sense of a large community where we actually belong to a whole lot of like-minded, fellow travelers, so to speak.
It was like your own lumberyard gang, right?
Yeah, it's your local HBA.
Yeah, or your local HBA. And I do think that kind of camaraderie would exist. It certainly existed on a really good crew, right? You'd have that, and you'd have that enthusiasm and stuff. But here it's just magnified out to a large community. And you can select, because you can unfollow, the people who are making snarky comments about your stuff, and just like, okay, I'm just going to shut you down because I don't have to listen to that. And I think that's important. That
I fight back.
Well, you can fight back too, but sometimes that only goes so far, because if somebody's really out there,
Steve takes it pretty far
fight,
sometimes.
Yeah.
Whenever we're on Build Show and people are commenting on my video, I'll get a text message from our general manager that also edits our podcast. And he'll say, it looks like your dad's defending you again. And it's Steve in the comments section putting on blast everybody that I didn't look at and I didn't bother to read. And I'm just like, I think it's more that Steve waits for this to happen so that he can participate in that. It's a nice exercise for him. It's sharpening the knife.
Yes.
Regularly.
Pretty much. Just sitting there at the
The comment section can be killer, though. We posted a video about water heater at my house, and I got a text message from my wife in the middle of the day wanting to know if the people were right and that she needed to be concerned with the way that the water heater was installed. And I was just like, I literally said, if you don't stop reading the comments, I'm going to block you from my account. Like, you will not be able to see this stuff. Do not listen to those people. Everything's been inspected. Everything is above board. Everything is correct. It's all personal opinion.
No, the comments on YouTube is really, you have to have a thick
brutal.
skin. It's brutal because there's a lot of people wanting to kind of assert themselves.
Or you fight back. Bigger bat theory.
Yeah.
Maybe
I don't know
just ignore it.
Yeah, I don't know that that's really going to change. I mean, trolls.
Oh, no.
Trolls are out there to work their dark, nefarious.
But you know what's funny? What's interesting is a lot of those programs, their success is based on comments and, you know, how involved that post gets, right? So if you want to bash it, I'm going to bash it back in the hope that you bash it, come right back over the top, because I'm going to come back. And then now we have this where we have 20 comments. So YouTube looks at it like, wow, people are really interested in this video.
Instead of two people are in their basement screaming at the
Screaming
computer.
at each other. Yeah, exactly. Well, there is that theory of information. You know, you don't, who was it? I think it was H.L. Mencken that said you don't measure it by good and bad. You just measure it by inches, you know, like if people are, even the negative comments are instructive or can be if they're genuine.
Yeah.
The problem is on the internet, they're not always genuine. And that's what I mean by a troll.
Oh yeah. The ones that get me are the people that say, boy, that's just a really stupid idea. It's like, well, don't say that.
Thanks.
Tell me what's
Thanks
the
for
right
helping.
idea.
Yeah,
have
that's not helpful at
something.
all. Right.
Like that's a stupid idea. Is, you know, and that's when I come back and say, oh, hey, genius, great comment. How about adding something to that next time so we can actually get something out of it? You know, I
think my favorite all-time troll comment was I posted a picture of a house that we had built, and one of the comments was, "This place looks like it smells bad." I laughed for 2 or 3 days because I was like, I'm not sure if there's a worse insult that the photo makes it look like it smells bad. And I sat on that for a week without commenting back, and then I was just like, you know what? I'm not gonna say anything. It's still there, I believe. I don't think I ever deleted it. But I was just like, man, that somebody knows how to hurt people. It wasn't one of Steve's houses, by the way.
No.
That's all right. I don't care.
This photo makes the house look like it smells bad. So what is outside of Instagram and Facebook being searchable, what does the future of your industry look like? Do you want to predict?
I don't know if I'm of my industry, meaning publishing in general, or
not construction. I consider us to be in the same industry in a strange way.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely I have a hard time. You know, I'm not really in my mind, I'm not in the publishing world. I'm in the construction world, and it's just a lifetime of thinking that way. I couldn't go off and be the editor of a food magazine or a science magazine. I like to think I could sometimes, and I probably could in one way. I just wouldn't be as invested in it the way I am with our industry. I mean, I think JLC is if I were to predict, I feel like all the things we've been sort of skirting around make me feel very comfortable about JLC's future, and just that we do sort of hold down the fort on, it's sort of like a backstop of information to all the social media, which is exciting and dynamic and fraught with problems, as we've been talking about. And it's nice to have this sort of backstop. So I love the fact that all of my favorite people, my favorite contributors, including both of you, but there's a whole lot of them, because we've always been about buy builder for builder. And there's an endless stream of excited, engaged, and knowledgeable people in our industry who I can continue to give voice to on JLC, but in that long format, thoughtful, considered way. And that will that will become part of the archive, and that archive continues to be valuable both as a piece of history, but also as something dynamic for the here and now. So I've been thinking a lot. So this is more of my old hippiness. I've been thinking a lot about Zen and the art of motorcycle maintenance a lot, and the idea of dynamic quality, which is the way I interpret it is dynamic quality is in the moment, right? It's like you look at it and there is no such thing as quality with a capital Q, right? It's only quality in the moment. And JLC will continue to serve the builders in the moment who are looking for information right now by being partly the memory of what is quality and allowing them to look forward to a better future, better buildings, and a better industry, something like that. So it's a little abstract there, but I do feel very solid with what JLC is doing. Do we need to change it up? Yeah, we constantly need to be looking, because we, as an industry, as a construction industry, I do think there have been a lot of things that have changed that are in the last 5 years. There's been more change in the industry than there has been in the last 15 years, or the previous 15 years. Where I do feel like building science is becoming more aligned with codes. I hope that continues. I heard a rumor that that may not continue, and that worries me, because while I feel like the air tightness standards of 2012 coming down to 3 ACH 50 for the majority of the country definitely begins to align with sound building practices of how our buildings actually work. I've always said
that one back already too, by the way.
Well, that's the rumor I heard, and that really concerns me, because that's gonna, already we're at a place, and I have a feeling, I don't know why that is. I don't know what's going on in the deliberations.
Because the HBA is a large lobbying body. That's my guess.
Well, is it that, or partly because one of my big criticisms have always been the ventilation standard. I'm not saying that it's wrong, but it's not understood. It's not well understood, and
you're talking about 62.2.
62.2, exactly.
Okay,
and it's slightly different in the IRC than it is in the ASHRAE 62.2 specifically. In other words, that they've boiled it down into a prescriptive table that you can follow, but it's based on the requirements of 62.2 at an airflow rate of what? The number of occupants plus 1 at 7.5.
7.5, yeah.
And then an additional 0.03 per square foot, and that's so 2013 ASHRAE 62.2, and I think as a minimum that's probably really good, but that's really confusing to a lot of people. And I think the IRC does a pretty good job of making that, turning that into a table.
But it's arguable the IRC is pretty confusing. The
IRC itself is confusing, yeah.
Yeah, so get over it out already.
My point is that if it's not well understood, and especially it goes back to the old, what I was saying about the California Energy Commission in Title 24. If the building inspectors don't understand it, they're not going to enforce it. And what worries me is that since 2012, we've mostly been building right and not ventilating right, or building tight and not ventilating right, and that's a concern. And so if that's one of the reasons to back off on the building tightness standards, that's really worrisome, because it's just going back to a dark age. It's going to a really poor indoor air quality when you're relying on on your building shell to filter your air.
Well, and they upped insulation values and window U factor, but then let go of air sealing, and it's like it really doesn't seem informed. How about
it seems like a recipe for disaster, doesn't it? I mean, tell me, Steve, aren't we going to increase condensation potentials by doing that?
Well, that's why Europe went to triple glazed windows, right? Because they were building houses very tight, but not ventilating them right. And they were getting condensation and health problems and mold issues inside the building.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
But hey, guess what? They figured it out, right? You know what's really interesting to me? That if you sit down at a table with any builder, any architect, designer, they're all the best in town, right? Until it comes to actually doing their job. And then it's like, oh, well, we can't do that. Oh, yeah, that, we don't do that. And it's like, or that just takes time to figure out. It's like, well, that's your job. That's our job, right? So I don't buy the whole, like, we'll make this easier because we don't have ventilation. Well, let's figure that out, right? Because we need to. And the crazy thing is for those of us that do build routinely, say, under 1.0, we laugh at 3.0.
Yeah.
Right. It's like, but yet there's people out there that say, oh my God, like that's the hardest hurdle. It's like, I would have to strive to do like 4.0. Like you'd have to go there and like just cut holes in the wall, different places, or just leave that sheathing short 1 inch, because to get to those types of numbers. But it's
our HERS rater sent out an email that was outlining all of the code changes, and he sends it to all the builders that they work with. So it's just a mass email, and it says, and they changed the code from 3 ACH 50 to 5 ACH 50, and then it was exclamation point, exclamation point, exclamation point, exclamation point. And I called him yesterday and I said, what's up, man? Why exclamation point? Why are we celebrating that? And he goes, because it's a major headache for me. I get it that it's not a problem for you guys, but all I do is email back and forth about what trade-offs that we can have with the inside the city if you don't meet the 3 air exchanges per hour right now. He said, it's going to make my life a hell of a lot easier. I'm not saying it was the right code choice. And I was like, okay, well, I can live with that answer, that you were happy that life was going to get easier, but damn, I think we should just be asking people to be better. So there's a good philosophical place to leave today's podcast too. Be better, please.
Be better.
Clayton, thanks for joining us on the podcast today. Amazing as always. I believe we will have you back at some point because we want to have a conversation about the skills gap, because I think your take on that is fantastic. So make notes for yourself so we can have a conversation again soon. Steve, do you have any closing thoughts?
No. Clayton, thank you very much, buddy. Always a pleasure chatting with you.
Thank you both.
Jake, not so much.
It's a pleasure.
Till next time on the podcast, I'm Jake Bruton. Steve Basic and Clayton DeKorne, once more, thank you guys.
Goodbye.
Do me a favor and subscribe to the podcast through iTunes or wherever you listen. Don't forget to go to iTunes and leave a 5-star review. And tell your friends. Follow us on Instagram and subscribe to JLC Online.
Yeah, hey
Thank
Clayton,
you
you're the man behind JLC Online on Instagram, right? Just so people know.
That's correct. Yeah, when I respond, it's almost always me.
Okay.
So
if somebody tells you to piss off, it's probably Clayton. I'm sure Clayton doesn't do that through at least the work account.
No, yeah. But
for those people that tuned off or clicked off when we said subscribe and leave a 5-star review, they missed that. So, okay. Have a good day. Thanks, Clayton.
Thank you. Bye-bye.